Welcome to DudeNoWay Live, where we embark on a quest to play the greatest games of all time. I'm your host, Moonchild of DudeNoWay, and today we are going over the meta heroes in the mid-season patch of Season 10 of Overwatch 2. We have a big thing to talk about today. There's a lot of changes that have happened since the mid-season patch. A lot of heroes have risen in the meta. A lot of heroes have fallen in the meta. Things are kind of shifting around, and as the sands of the meta change, we too need to change with them or be left in the dust. And I want to thank everybody for coming in today. We're going to be talking about tanks. We're going to be talking about the buffs to tanks and the way that those buffs have shaped kind of how we need to play moving forward and who we need to pick as the heroes that we decide we want to be using. Are there heroes that you want to try? Are there heroes that you should be picking up and giving a shot to? Should you be learning things? And should you be trying things that are outside of your general wheelhouse? Well, today we're going to talk about that, and thank you all for being here. We are starting off with D.Va, with the changes to tanks, that being the critical headshot damage reduced by 25%, plus the changes to armor, going back to the Overwatch 1 model where they reduce damage by 5 per shot, up to 50% of the damage of the shot actually done. D.Va is actually in an extremely strong place in the meta right now, kind of a sleeper pick for the people that are wondering whether or not D.Va could be good or will be good after these patches. She is significantly better than she was, because the amount of times that D.Va gets demech'd by characters like Tracer, by characters like Sombra, are significantly less than they were before. D.Va has a decent amount of armor as well, and because of that, D.Va is going to be in a solid place as long as she has support that are backing her up. When you look at the amount of health compared to armor that D.Va has, you see that she actually has a pretty nice buffer in terms of how much armor she has compared to her health pool, and because of that, you're going to see D.Va remaining with that damage reduction more often than you will with other characters. Not only does she have the large amount of armor compared to her health, but she also has the mobility to be able to do things that other tanks simply can't, and she can be in places that other tanks simply can't. And because of that, the mobility plus the amount of armor that she has, combined with the reduction of 25% to the headshot damage that she actually takes, which for D.Va is in her visor, as long as you are shooting her in the face, you're going to experience a similar reaction to the way that it was before. However, the smaller amounts of burst damage that characters like Sombra and Tracer are able to do to her makes it so that D.Va actually stays in mech a significant amount of time longer than she was prior to. And again, with her mobility, she's able to get to high ground positions and play outside of the range of a lot of other characters. And because of that, D.Va is actually in an incredibly solid place right now. That being said, when you look at D.Va's headshot damage against a Tracer and against other DPS who are similar with no armor, you're going to see that her headshot damage is actually pretty strong. However, when you swap her opponent over to somebody like a Reinhardt who has a large amount of armor, you're going to see that it takes a significant amount of time to chew through that armor health, and because of that, D.Va is actually a little bit less powerful than she was versus other tanks. The D.Va shotgun spread has made her a less powerful character overall in the meta in terms of offensive ability, but her defensive ability has gone up to compensate, and because of that, while D.Va may not be getting as many, direct kills on like a Winston or like a Mauga as she was able to before, even with as large as their health pools are, and as big as their hit points are, you can see that it just takes a significant amount of time to chew through that armor health compared to how it used to be, because D.Va is actually taking both the reduction of 25% from the headshot, plus the reduction of actual damage per pellet being less, because D.Va uses a shotgun-style weapon. She is dealing a significant amount of less damage than she was prior to the patch versus other tanks. So, D.Va, a very strong pick. I would say probably A tier in this new meta, but has lost a little bit of her offensive ability, but has gained a little bit of her own defensive ability. As we move on to other tanks, we have Doomfist, and Doomfist is not going to be able to take advantage of the additional damage reduction from armor. So while D.Va has a significant amount of damage reduction combined with the negative 25% from critical hits, Doomfist is only getting the reduction of 25% from critical hits, and because of that, Doom is actually getting a slight buff to his survivability with this patch, and is actually, I would say, basically an S tier pick if you are good with Doom. That being said, most people are not good with Doom. So, if you can play him to the top of his ability, then you can get S-tier potential out of Doomfist. But if you are kind of a regular player or you're just learning the character, there are simply better picks than Doom in terms of his offensive ability. And in addition to that, Doomfist also takes the reduction in headshot damage, as well as the reduction in the pellet spread damage from armor changes. And that is going to make it, again, you can see, a significant amount of damage required to actually get tanks out of their armor health. So while Doomfist remains as lethal as he used to be against squishier targets, you're going to find it much harder for Doom to be dueling tanks. And while that's not necessarily Doom's, forte to begin with, you are going to see Doomfist struggling a little bit, again, especially against the higher armor tanks in the game here. And so while Doom can be S tier in terms of his offensive potential and in terms of what you can do with him, overall, because of the skill ceiling required, he has S tier potential, but he's more of an A tier pick. And because of that, the meta has changed around for Doom a little bit, where he was kind of like B tier before. With the reduction in critical hit damage taken, he has actually gone up a little bit, up into A tier, and potentially S tier, depending on how good you can be. However, because he uses a shotgun type weapon, he cannot actually make it into the S tier because he is taking that damage reduction from armor health from other tanks. Spud, what's going on? I can't stay long, but wanted to say hey to everyone and hope your stream is going well. I appreciate you coming out, Spud. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your night, whatever it is you're doing this evening. And tell James I said hello. I hope you guys have a great time doing whatever it is you guys are doing. We are going over tanks and other characters that have risen and fallen in the meta today, so I totally understand, no big deal. So, in terms of Doomfist, like I said, about an A-tier pick, right on par with D.Va, although, because both of them have strong mobility, D.Va, like I said, lost a little bit of her offensive utility, but gained a little bit of defense. Doom has lost a very small amount of offense, because you never really fought other tanks with Doomfist. He was never, like, a tank buster compared to D.Va, who was the counter to Winston prior to this, right? So sometimes you would actually use D.Va to tank bust another tank. Doomfist sitting solid at the A tier right now, so that's pretty good for him. With Junker Queen, you're going to see Queen, similar to Doom, is going to be gaining a small amount of viability here in this meta because of her ability to take less damage from headshots overall. But that being said, because she has no armor, she's missing out on a significant portion of this buff compared to other characters like D.Va, like Winston, like Reinhardt, who are going to be able to better capitalize on the changes versus characters like Tracer, who are not going to be as meta after today. I've had the worst comp day today. I'm back in plat because I'm in a losing streak. Hey, don't worry about it. Like I said, I always say that the games are meant to be won like half of them and then lost like half of them. And we're going to have losing streaks. You're going to have winning streaks. Take it in stride, because there will be a day you'll come back on, maybe tomorrow or the day after that, and you'll come back on and you'll end up with a massive win streak that will put you back up farther into Diamond than you were before. Don't feel bad about it at all. It happens to the best of the best, even people who are at professional levels, even like Overwatch League and Contenders players, and like the OWCS, and like all of these people in the collegiate and all of these people experience the same thing that you do, Spud, so don't feel bad about it at all. They're dropping up and down in tier over and over again as they play competitive as well. So just be confident in your abilities, take it one day at a time, and you will grow, and you will make it into Masters. I promise if you keep playing, eventually you will level yourself out into the Masters tier, close to that top 500 range. So with Queen, like I was talking about, she does not have any armor health, and with her relatively low health pool, although you can gain a little bit more with Commanding Shout, and I'll talk about the buff to Commanding Shout here in just a second, with her relatively low health pool, she is still, and her lack of armor, she is still very susceptible to headshots from characters that have high burst damage, like Widowmaker, or like Sojourn's Railgun, and stuff like that. I wish you told me that earlier. My PS4 is on the front lawn. Oh man, the poor PlayStation. I totally understand, though. Don't worry. It's not as big of a deal as you think it is. It literally, like, if you go into any pro streamer's stream and you see, like, people that were former Overwatch League players, you'll come into their shows one day and sometimes they'll be on a streak where they'll have, like, 2 wins and 11 losses and they've been live for 12 hours. You know what I mean? So don't take it personal. It's not you. It's everybody. It's the game itself. It's not you. Don't worry. I promise. So, with Queen and her smaller amount of hit points overall, you're going to be susceptible to higher burst damage, things like Widowmaker and the Sojourn headshots, as well as rockets from Pharah and bombs from Junkrat, which are recently buffed, and we'll talk about those in just a minute as well. But the amount of health that she has is not necessarily indicative of a tank that you would see in the A or the S tier, but you can count on Queen to be a solid B tier option, while her buffed commanding shout is a little bit better than it was. You're going to be able to use this in the animation of actually utilizing your axe. So if you see, I'm going to press the axe button, and then in the meantime, while the animation is going, I'm going to press commanding shout. You can actually activate these 2 abilities at the same time now, which will not only give you the burst of additional speed, but the hit points that you need to be able to fight in a closer melee range type of duel. But just in general, because she is lacking a larger health pool and armor health at all, you're not going to see as big of an uptick for Queen players in the meta as you would see for some of the higher armor targets. Queen is looking like a solid B in the mid-season patch right now, and not a bad tank by any stretch. Very good kit overall, and with her buffed commanding shout, is able to close the gap a little bit better. So while she has moved up, maybe like we could say she's moved from like a B to a B+, but she's not quite A tier, just based on the amount of hit points that she has compared to the amount of hit points the other tanks have. As we move on to Mauga, you can see that Mauga has a decent amount of armor health, and because of that, he's not only going to take advantage of the armor health damage reduction from things hitting less hard per shot, but he's also going to be able to take advantage of the negative damage to critical hits. And while that does not affect his... I want to be clear, that does not affect Mauga's chain guns. While a target is burning, the target will not actually give you a critical hit. It only counts for headshots, right? So the damage reduction from armor will only count for headshots. It does not actually count for Mauga's burning and then shooting a target with his other chain gun. That's not the same as actually landing a headshot. So while his damage overall will go down slightly versus other tanks, his tank buster role is still very much intact based on the amount of armor that he has and also the amount of damage that he's able to put out. You are going to see him go down in damage slightly, and you can see how long it takes now to get the armor health away from a character just with a single chain gun. But as we let Winston's health regenerate here, and I walk up to his face and I hold down both buttons, excuse me, you're going to see that Winston actually loses his hit points even while in armor very quickly. And so Mauga's tank buster role is very much intact. In addition to that, he gains additional health based on the amount of critical hits he actually deals out, and because of that, you're going to see Mauga remain at the top of the meta here. Although he might not be the most meta pick, he's a solid A tier versus some of the stronger tanks, and we'll talk about those in a minute, but a solid A tier in terms of what he can do. And again, when I walk up to Winston and I hold both triggers down, you're going to see, even with the changes to armor, which significantly reduce the amount of damage that Mauga puts out, you're going to see that he still absolutely chews through Winston's hit points. And it's very quick, almost on par with that of D.Va. But he's also dealing that burning damage over time, which is something else to consider. So very much still a meta pick, and you see as you deal that damage, his health actually does go up, which makes him an even tankier target. So Mauga is solid in the A tier right now, and actually a very good counter to some of the other tanks in the meta. The top tier pick still, even after the buffs and the nerfs, is Orisa. Orisa is an S tier tank. She is all the way at the top of the meta, and she has remained at the top of the meta for a really long time. She got a slight nerf to her spear spin cooldown, and you can see that it is now on a 10-second cooldown, or a 9-second cooldown, I guess. Compared to what it was, it went up in cooldown by 2 seconds, which reduces her uptime slightly. But if you look at how much armor health Orisa has compared to her actual hit points, this is where it starts to come into play, combined with the reduction in critical hit damage. The amount of armor health that Orisa has is most of her hit point bar, right? Similar to D.Va, you're going to see that most of her hit points are actually armor, which means she's getting that damage reduction most of the time, right? But the thing about Orisa is that when she goes gold, she is actually unable to be crit at all. So during her Fortify, you're going to see that she actually can't be crit anyway. So not only does she get the minus 25% damage reduction from headshots, she also can make herself completely immune to being critically hit, and she can combine those based on where her health is and where she needs to be more tanky and less tanky, like respectively speaking. So if she gets taken down out of her entirety of her armor, she can then hit her Fortify to not only give her additional health, but remove her ability to be critically hit in those times, which makes her significantly tankier than other tanks in the meta. Not only that, but she can completely nullify damage in front of her with her spear spin. And then while inside of her ultimate, she also cannot be critically hit. You can see she goes gold inside of the ultimate, so she can hold that and allow her team time to actually heal her back up. Orisa is very much still an S tier tank, even after the changes to her spear spin ability, the reduction in cooldown, or the increase in cooldown, while that does space out her abilities slightly, her control over her entirety of her kit, her ability to control when she is and is not critically hit, plus the damage reduction from headshots, plus, Fortify and her ultimate both giving her the immunity to crits, plus, she could just shoot forever. She has, like, infinite ammo, she never has to reload, and the only thing she has to do is just wait for a small amount of time, and in doing so, she will reset her heat buildup on her gun. She is not only one of the most offensive tanks, but one of the most defensive tanks as well, and while she lacks mobility, what she absolutely does have is staying power, and Orisa is still at the top of the meta, 100% an S tier tank here, moving forward in the mid-season patch of Season 10. With Ramatra, similar to Orisa, you're going to see that he has a decent amount of armor health, which means he gets to double down on the damage reduction. However, based on his weapon and the type of weapon that he has, he actually is affected pretty heavily by the changes to armor. And the changes to armor mean that his primary fire, while in his Omnic form, are going to make it less effective against tanks and characters with armor. And you can see just how long it takes to burn somebody out of their armor health compared to how long it takes to kill them while they don't have armor health. It's actually a significant amount of damage reduction from his primary fire, and because of that, like, he loses a little bit of his place in the meta. And while he can go into his tank form and increase the amount of armor that he actually has, he can also block to decrease the damage that he takes, and because of that, you're going to see him very much like Orisa, able to control the amount of damage that he takes on a greater scale, although with far less offensive capability. So while Ramatra is doubling down on the benefits from the reduction in critical hit damage and the armor health, and again, he can go into Omnic form to give him a large amount of extra armor health, he is still kind of a B-tier tank, and while he's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, being able to block damage is not nearly as good as being able to block damage and shoot like Orisa, and that's why he is stuck inside of the B-tier, and unfortunately for Ramatra, it doesn't look like he's going to be coming out of the B tier anytime soon, but he is still a very solid pick. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination, although better in certain situations than others, right? You can see as I go into his into his tank form even, you're going to see that his tank form is actually able to very easily mop up the armor health of another tank. And you can see that its damage is reduced less than his actual staff, and that's because it is a larger amount of burst damage, and the staff is a smaller amount of incremental damage over time. And you can hear how many times that hits compared to his actual punches. So you're going to see Ramatra sitting in the B tier, a very good pick, but not a meta pick by any means. Very strong, but only in certain situations, and more situational than anything else. With Reinhardt has no ability to increase his health. He has no ability to increase his armor health or anything like that, and his kit is very old. So unfortunately with Rein, you are going to see, while he does get buffed in his defensive capabilities because of the damage reduction from armor, about 50% of his hit points are actually armor health, and so you are going to see Reinhardt last a little bit longer, which is going to be hell for the metal ranks and an absolute joke for everything above like gold, platinum, right around the high gold, low plat level. Reinhardt just gets taken apart, and nothing will change here moving forward in the meta, although he did get a slight buff to his Earth Shatter inside of Season 10 when Season 10 launched. You're not going to see Reinhardt make it to the top of the meta anytime soon, although he does have a bit more staying power than he used to, and combined with his shield and smart and strong shield usage can actually prolong his life for a significant amount of time, compared to other tanks like Orisa, who does not have to choose between being offensive or defensive, can actually do both at the same time. Compared to other tanks like Orisa, you're not going to see Rein as meta as Orisa. So Reinhardt is looking like a high C, low B tier pick in terms of tanks, and the ability to carve through other tanks' armor health is going to be his main draw here as we move into the rest of Season 10. We're going to let Winston actually refill his armor health all the way to full, and then as you can see, you can clean up the entirety of his armor health with a single fire strike and 2 primary swings. So as you look, he's got full health right now. 1 fire strike, and then 2 primary swings from Reinhardt takes Winston all the way out of his armor health. And because of that, you're going to see him actually able to kind of negate the armor changes by a pretty large degree. The swing from Reinhardt deals a significant amount of damage, and because of that, you don't have to worry as much about the changes to armor health. In addition to that, his fire strike does not actually critically hit, so he will not be at all susceptible to the negative 25% damage reduction from headshots. So that is kind of where Ryan kind of could be argued is maybe low B tier, because the reduction in headshot damage, if it could affect his fire strike or if it could affect his primary fire, would absolutely cripple him and put him into like a D tier. But because he doesn't have to worry about that, it could be argued that he's maybe a B, like a low B tier compared to some of the other B tier picks. But he still has to choose between being offensive or defensive at the same time, kind of like Ramatra in that way, where Ramatra can block, Ryan can hold up the shield, but he can't do both at the same time like Orisa can. And so Ryan is looking like a solid, like a C tier, low B kind of pick here inside of the meta, and he does have a large amount of armor health, like I said, and will be able to tank a few headshots from these higher burst damage characters like Widow or like Sojourn's Rail, but still very susceptible to being killed on his own, and you can easily play around his shield and deny most of his value. With Roadhog, you're looking at kind of the top tier of top tier in terms of survivability here. While Roadhog is lacking all armor health, he has no armor health to speak of, the 25% reduction in headshot damage actually makes him significantly tankier than he was before. In addition to that, the tanks got a reduction in their knockback that they receive, and while Roadhog is also getting that reduction, his hook actually does not count as a reduction in that damage. So you're going to be able to use Hog's hook pretty much the exact same way that you could have used it before, even against other tank heroes, and you're going to be able to pull people off the map without having to worry about the reduction in boop actually taking effect on these characters. And so because of that, you're going to see Roadhog kind of sitting pretty in the highest of A tier, just barely scratching his way at the S tier here. Because, like I said, the other tanks, while they are booped less from smaller characters, like Pharah with her aerial boop, like Lucio with his boop on the ground, the hook does not actually count. So there is not a reduction in the amount of distance pulled by the hook, and because of that, these tanks are still very susceptible to the one-shot. In addition to that, Roadhog has his Take a Breather, which not only heals his health, but also gives him damage reduction while channeling it, and because of that, he's able to very easily shrug off large amounts of damage and put people kind of in a position where they have to funnel a ridiculously huge amount of damage into him to actually make it so that they can kill him at all. Roadhog is, without a doubt, the highest of A tier, if not an S tier pick inside of this meta. Very oppressive and extremely susceptible to some of these other counters, but with the minus 25% damage from headshots, you can time your take a breather correctly and negate almost all of the damage that a high burst damage character would be able to put out on you, and essentially just live for what feels like forever on Roadhog. So Roadhog is looking like probably going to be the most oppressive tank moving into this meta, while he is not necessarily as good as Orisa, because again, not only does he lack the range of Orisa, but he has to choose when he is defensive compared to his counterpart here being able to be offensive and defensive at the same time. Hog has an enormous hit point pool combined with the ability to heal himself and his ability to reduce the amount of damage that he takes while healing himself, and because of that, going to be a very oppressive character to deal with. Hog could be argued that he is S tier at this point in the meta, although he is countered decently well by Mauga and very easily taken out with other characters' combinations, but we'll talk about those here in a little bit. With Sigma gets the damage reduction from headshot damage, but because he is lacking in all armor health, you can see his health is blue, which means he has shields. The shields regenerate on their own, but do not actually provide the reduction in damage to the smaller, like, pellet spread shotgun characters or the submachine gun wielding characters like Tracer and Sombra, and because of that, Sigma is slightly tankier than he was before, and in addition gets the reduction in his knockback received through the tank passive. However, Sigma has a tool for every situation, and because of that, Sigma is like a mid-A tier pick in terms of what he can do. Very good on certain maps, extremely dominant on maps like Casino Royale, but very much not as good on other maps, and because of that, Sig has his moments where he can be the most meta pick that you could possibly take with you, or just simply not as good of an option as other characters. And so you can counter most of the things in the game either with his kinetic grasp or with his shield, and his shield got a slight buff moving into Season 10 with the speed that it actually travels, so you can see that you could throw the shield out and position it just a little bit faster than you could before. Sigma also received a buff to his ultimate, which makes it so that you don't actually have to be in line of sight of the center of the ultimate to be able to receive the damage, and you can see that I was still able to hit this Winston from around the corner even though I couldn't see him. So Sigma is arguably A tier right now, although kind of at the lower end of the A tier, and his ability to counter most things in the game with one of his abilities, plus his damage reduction from headshots, is not quite as good of a combo as having armor health. So Sigma, very good tank, but situational in terms of where you use him, and map dependent in that way as well. With Monkey, you're going to see that Winston is a better tank overall than he was prior to this update, and that is because the characters that really countered Monkey are no longer as effective against him as they were before. And I'm talking about characters like D.Va, characters like Tracer. These characters were incredibly oppressive to Winston before, but with the changes to armor are actually significantly less dangerous to him overall, because the D.Va shotguns get a significant damage reduction compared to Winston now with his armor health, so as long as you can keep your Winston inside of armor health and with kind of cheeky play from Winston overall, where you utilize your high ground as a piece of cover and you utilize your mobility to get yourself into places and get yourself out of places very easily, as long as you can keep yourself inside of armor health, it's much harder to counter Winston inside of this meta moving forward here. The characters that countered him the most, Tracer and D.Va, are taking a significant hit to the amount of damage that they actually deal to him, and because of that, Winston can be arguably an S-tier pick if you play him correctly. At the very least, he is a high A-tier pick, but he requires characters to play around his playstyle, and that means characters need to come with him while he dives, because his offensive ability is still not as good as his counterpart, like an Orisa. It's still very difficult to kill a group of characters as Winston, although he gets better the more enemies he can attack at the same time, right? Like, his damage over time goes up exponentially based on the amount of people that he can hit with his Tesla cannon. So you're going to see Winston at a very strong place in the meta right now. Again, A tier, if not S tier, in terms of what he can do. While his health pool is smaller, his mobility is larger than pretty much any character in the game. His ability to get into places and get out out of places, plus his shield being able to keep him alive in places where he needs it, are going to be crucial to his survival. But probably the in terms of high level play, you're going to see Winston still basically at the top of the meta. Especially the higher rank you go, the better the players are that are actually playing Winston. You're going to see that he is going to remain as powerful as he was before, with even a slight bump up based on his reduction compared to other characters. As we move on to Wrecking Ball, this is similar to Winston in that the higher the strength of the player behind him, the better he will actually be at being oppressive. And with Ball, he has received so many quality of life changes since the start of Season 10 that he has actually moved up to basically S tier, but requires the capability of the user to be a lot higher than characters like Amalga, who can get more value out of a character for lower actual input on their part. And so this is extremely impactful as you move around with Wrecking Ball. Even you can make use of his Wrecking Ball grapple hook a lot more than you could before, with the 1 second cooldown as you fail to reach your fireball speed. And that allows you to do things that you simply weren't able to do before. You can slide yourself up to places with the ability to pull yourself up to the top of the claw, and then you can utilize this as a quick spot for a pile driver while still being able to use your hook to get away. And smart Ball players will be able to utilize their vertical space in a way that other characters simply can't, and they'll be able to get the value out of the pile driver that they would otherwise be relying on the claw to do. That they'll be able to do that simply because they can now pull themselves up to the top of where the claw's cable is. So again, if you hold space, you can pull yourself up to the top of the claw's cable and give yourself a very easy place to pile drive from. The pile driver also received a buff in terms of the amount of lift time that it gives you. It lifts you in the air 50% longer than it used to now with the mid-season patch. And again, this is just one more buff to Ball. In addition to that, he got a damage buff to, I believe he got a damage buff to the pile driver. He also got a damage buff to the minefield, in addition to the distance that you are actually booped while inside of a mine, the distance you are actually booped while damaged by a mine has gone up by 100% as well, and because of that, you're going to see Ball doing things that Ball was never able to do before. A much more oppressive character than he was in the Season 9 patches. And in addition to that, Ball has armor health as well. So not only does he get to take advantage of the reduction from headshots, he also has armor health to counter his own counters. So Sombra, who was the main counter to Wrecking Ball before, is now less able to actually punish him for his ability to be in places very quickly. And because of that, you're going to see Ball be more oppressive than he's ever been, but it requires, similar to Doomfist, it requires a player who is capable of utilizing all of the tricks in his trade, right? And Ball's health can go extremely, extremely high, all the way up past 1,000 with his adaptive shield ability, and that is on a relatively short cooldown, so Ball is going to be able to get into places very quickly, buff his health, do some damage, and then get out of places very quickly, as well as getting bonus usage from his pile driver, as well as keeping his hook on a 1 second cooldown while utilizing his vertical space. And this is going to make Ball legitimately the most oppressive tank in the game for characters that are able to easily take advantage of his abilities. And again, this is skill ceiling dependent, but one of the highest skill ceiling tanks in the game is now even stronger than he was before. This is an S tier pick if you can use him. Kind of a high B tier if you are new to Ball, and because of that, the amount of value you get with him, similar to Sojourn, similar to Doomfist, is going to be directly dependent on how good you actually are with the character. You're going to see the distance that these characters are being knocked around from the minefield is larger than it's ever been before. You're going to see that as this bot kind of moves around, they're accepting a ton of mines here, and it makes them extremely, extremely easy to be farmed up on. The Minefield is a better ultimate than it's ever been. The Pile Driver is stronger than it's ever been. The Claw has a 1-second cooldown when used properly, and in addition to that, you can multi-boop people with certain strategies with Ball by bouncing yourself off of walls and stuff like that. So not only does he retain all of that, but he also retains his ability to one-hit things off the map. Ball is top of the meta right now, but you need to know how to use him. S tier. In terms of Zarya, Zarya is like a high B tier to an A tier, depending on how good your enemy is at dealing with your shields, and your headshot damage is going to go down slightly with the 25% reduction, but while that does allow her for some additional staying power, she has only shield health to speak of, and because of that, she is not going to be nearly as strong as a character with armor health. If Zarya had armor, she would downright be the most oppressive tank in the game, and while her damage is still incredibly high at high charge, a smart team will learn how to track the shield durations and give her less value from her shields in general. She will be less able to be oppressive to characters across the board in this meta that are mobile, and the amount of damage that she takes, while it has gone down slightly, has not gone down enough to push her into a spot where she is really able to compete with some of the higher tier tanks. Zarya is very good in certain scenarios and very good against teams that are not able to counter her. But as you get into the higher ranks and you see people hit their headshots more often, you're going to find that the Zarya pick becomes less and less effective the more adept the players you're playing against are. Still legitimately the highest damage character in the entire game, but kind of a low B tier pick compared to some of the other tanks that you could be using. And again, it requires the team to make mistakes, and if your enemy team is not making mistakes, it's going to be hard to get value out of this character. When you look at Ashe, Ashe is actually in a significantly good place in this meta because while she does lose some of the damage from the headshots, she is not actually as affected by that compared to other characters, because she can use her primary fire combined with the dynamite to keep the DPS passive applied to people. And with the DPS passive applied to people, specifically against tanks, her negative 20% healing that she's applying is going to make it significantly harder for tanks to stay alive, even while they have a support actually keeping them up. So while Ashe is not necessarily the best pick in the game, she is still very strong compared to squishy characters, and even against characters with large amounts of armor, she makes it difficult for them to regen health, because with the changes to the health regeneration passive, she can deny their ability to regenerate health in between team fights by applying the burn from the dynamite, and that will allow her to kind of sit pretty at like a high B tier to a low A tier here for Ashe. And again, that is solely dependent on her ability to apply the DPS passive for a much longer time than most other characters can. While we look at Bastion has a decent amount of armor health already, and then in addition to that, his tank form can actually put out a large amount of damage. That being said, his primary fire in his regular Omnic form is actually less affected by the changes to tanks than his tank form's damage is. So while we watch on this Winston at full health, you can see how long it takes for that armor health to go away. That is actually, the higher fire rate, lower amount of damage overall, is actually more affected by the changes to armor, reducing them by 5 per hit, compared to his primary fire, which deals a larger amount of burst damage. As you can see, the primary fire actually deals almost the same amount of damage versus armor compared to the tank form, and because of that, the primary fire for Bastion is actually a little bit better now than it was in the previous patch. And while this does not make Bastion an A tier or S tier pick by any stretch, he is sitting pretty in the B tier and has really no downsides, as well as a large amount of benefit from his damage reduction from his own armor. So the downsides to his damage compared to armor health can be negated by utilizing his primary fire to get them out of their armor health prior to swapping into tank form. So while it requires a little bit of switch up in how you play the character, it doesn't actually take away too much from the kit, and actually gives him a small amount of defensive ability as well. So Bastion sitting pretty in the B tier, very much a B tier pick here. With Cassidy, you're going to see that the Cassidy burst damage is actually almost as effective as it was prior to this patch, and it looks like I lagged a little bit there where it double hit the Winston for a second, but the Cassidy burst damage is only slightly affected by the damage reduction from armor, and as I swap over to Reinhardt, you're going to see that it's still very much effective at taking Rein out of his armor health. Only 3 shots there, and Cassidy absolutely demolishes the lower health tanks like Junker Queen and Zarya, because he can just plink away at their head over and over again, dealing a ridiculously huge amount of damage to them and just completely reducing their ability to be effective. While Queen can utilize her commanding shout during the animation of other abilities now, what she can't do is deal with the Hinder Grenade in any kind of real capacity. And so this puts Cask at kind of an A tier pick, because he is able to deal that burst damage from a respectable range, from right around medium range, but also is able to counter the damage reduction both from headshots and from armor health a little bit better than other characters because of his high burst damage. Echo is a low-key, the highest of A tier, potentially an S tier pick, because she does not get as big of a reduction in her ability based on the amount of changes to tanks. So you see her primary fire, while this does take a significant amount of punishment to actually take a tank out of the armor health, as I swap it to Roadhog and I swap it back to Reinhardt to be able to deal with his armor, or reset his armor health, you're going to see that Echo with a sticky bomb combined with 2 shots from her primary fire are basically able to nullify his armor completely. 3 shots to completely take him out of the armor and into regular health, but that will actually deal more than his armor health worth of damage to him and take him down very, very quickly, right? So it depends on a combo for Echo to be able to utilize this. However, her main ability, which is her focusing beam, does not actually get damage reduction from the headshots, so you're missing out on the buff to tanks there. You're completely dodging that while you're using her focusing beam, and while this is more powerful on targets that are below 50% health, because it is a damage over time, it is able to absolutely shred through the remainder of tank hit points, and against characters like Roadhog, who don't actually benefit from the armor at all, you're able to very, very easily deal with them, even with their gigantic health pools. And because of this, Echo is kind of like a sleeper S-tier pick. Although her ultimate got buffed a little bit and is now a little bit better at generating an ultimate than it was before, very slightly better at generating its own ultimate during duplicate, the ability to negate the buffs to tanks pretty much entirely. You're going to see she can just absolutely demolish characters with certain combinations, and because of that, learning Echo, if you are not an Echo main, is going to be pretty essential if you do play DPS very frequently in this meta. I would not sleep on Echo in any way. Like I said, very much a high A tier to a sleeper S tier pick here. As we move on to Genji, Genji is not only going to benefit, or not only going to fail slightly because of the damage reduction from headshots, but he's also got the kind of bursty nature of his, when I say burst, I mean like his ability does not hit for a large amount of damage in a single shot, but rather a smaller amount of damage in 3 shots. Each one of these shurikens are actually getting their damage reduced by 5, which is reducing his damage overall, and then in addition to that, that stacks with the damage reduction from the armor or from the tank passive. So Genji is going to be struggling a little bit here to be able to take tanks out of their armor health, and even up close and personal, Genji is, when he's hitting all 3 of his shots, still requires 3 hits to take a Reinhardt out of his armor. We swap over to Orisa, you're going to see the same thing. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 hits on Orisa to take her out of her armor health. Genji is kind of like a low B tier, can be very useful as long as you are combining your abilities with other things like a melee or a dash. You can very quickly put in burst damage, but even still, it's not really, it's not as beneficial as it used to be, and Genji is actually, is hurt a little bit more by the armor change than other characters, because he doesn't deal as much upfront damage as other characters would. Well, Hanzo has gotten a small buff in this meta. The amount of damage that he is that is reduced off of his arrows per hit is less than other characters. So you're gonna see he's gonna be a little bit stronger against tanks than he was than other characters like Tracer because of his high burst damage, but his inability to hit characters with, or to one hit even characters that are squishy, makes him very much a C tier pick. Hanzo, while he isn't bad, he is not good either, not good by any stretch of the imagination. And while you can use a certain combo to absolutely obliterate tanks like Roadhog, who do not have any armor, you can see that you can hit the headshot and then follow up with a Storm Arrow to very quickly eliminate Roadhog, right? You can very quickly eliminate him. The buff to his Dragon Strike ultimate does not actually help him that much. So you're going to see this still takes a significant amount of time to actually kill a tank. And for anybody who has a brain, they're just going to walk out of this, dude. Like, they're just not going to be affected by this really at all. You're going to see that Roadhog is not nearly as good, or excuse me, Hanzo is not nearly as good against tanks that do have armor as he used to be. And, like, the reduction in headshots plus the armor damage, while it does not reduce his damage as much as like a character without armor like a Zarya, you're gonna see that Zarya takes a large amount of damage from Hanzo, but the buff to his ultimate was not enough to make him meta. Hanzo very much still a C-tier pick here inside of the mid-season patch. And it feels bad because you want to see this character be good. You want him to have a place, but in the current state of 250 HP squishy characters combined with the changes to headshot damage and the armor changes, like he just can't succeed until they buff him very slightly in his primary fire. You compare that to Junkrat, who has risen in the meta here slightly, while he has gotten a slight damage increase to his primary fire, increasing the 2-hit damage from 140, I want to say it was 240, up to 250, which allows him to 2-hit the squishier characters with his primary fire, and I'm just going to pull Soldier in for this. Hello. And so it's able to easily 2-hit the characters that are 250 HP. The Junkrat actually has gotten the lesser end of the nerf here because the bombs that he shoots out with his primary fire are not actually able to crit. So he is completely skating the tank passive, buffing the amount of damage that they take from headshots. So Junkrat is fully unable to critically hit with any of his abilities. His mine doesn't crit, and his primary fire doesn't crit either. And because of that, you're going to see that Junkrat is actually, compared to other characters in the game, actually a little bit better than you might think he might be. And Junkrat overall is going to be a pretty meta pick here. I'm going to say high A tier for Junkrat, who has not only high mobility, but a decent ultimate, plus a primary fire that got buffed, as well as his inability to be hurt by the tank passive. Junkrat is very much a sleeper pick here, and if he's not A tier, then he, at the very least, he is the highest of B tier right now. Junkrat is very, very good. In terms of Mei, you're going to be looking at her primary fire as basically unable to be affected by the damage from the negative 25% critical hit. However, it is severely affected by the changes to armor. So you're going to see Mei is very, very weak compared to characters that have armor when utilizing her primary fire. And as we let Reinhardt's health go all the way back up, you're going to see just how long it takes for his armor health to drain away. It literally feels like an eternity. And because of that, you're going to have to utilize a combination of her right click compared with her left click. But the right click itself is also reduced by 25% damage, and the changes to armor. So Mei is actually in a significantly worse place than she was prior to these tank changes. You can see even with the critical hit from the icicle, it still is not as much damage as you would hope to see from Mei, and so you're going to have to pepper them with the primary or with the secondary fire as you close the gap, and then utilize your primary fire as they get lower in health. And as I wait for Reinhardt's health to come back, you're going to see as I close the gap here and I move back into melee range, that was a more effective way of dealing with him, but still significantly increases her breakpoint in terms of time to kill. Mei is like a high C to a low B tier, not a very good character in this meta, just based on the changes. When we compare that to Pharah is kind of similar to Junkrat in that regard, insofar as that she not only gets to not deal with the 25% reduction from headshots, because she does not actually critically hit with her rockets. Her primary fire is also a high burst damage, so it is less affected overall by the changes to armor. And because of that, Pharah is sitting pretty in the A tier right now. You're going to see her boop ability is still able to move tanks a decent amount, so if you can catch tanks in a spot where they are close to a ledge, you're still going to be able to one-hit them. And in addition to that, with her ability to stay high in the sky and out of the range of a lot of tanks, her survivability is pretty high as well, plus her damage being less affected overall by the changes to the tank passive. Pharah is one of the best characters for damage inside of the mid-season patch here in Season 10, and when you learn how to utilize her ability to fly effectively, you're going to see yourself in a sitting pretty in a good spot. The only thing that Pharah does not have that keeps her out of the A tier is her barrage is actually not as good as other ultimates in the game, and the S tier pick just can't be said for her because of that. Her ultimate is just not strong enough to be able to deal with some of these characters. Because it holds her stationary in the air and removes her ability to be evasive in that way. So while Pharah is very good, again, at a high A tier, she is not able to move herself into S tier, and that is unfortunate for her, but the character has gone up in the meta, probably from a B to an A tier overall. When you look at Reaper, Reaper is not able to deal with the armor health of tanks very well at all, even at the closest of range, and we're going to let Reinhardt regenerate his health here so that we can show off just how big of a change this is. Even at the closest of range for Reaper, you're going to see that he is still struggling to deal that damage to tank characters because of his shotgun weapon. The pellets are reduced by 5 per pellet, and in addition to that, his headshot damage overall is reduced by 25% versus tanks, and so Reaper's kind of only role, which was being a tank buster, is kind of reduced very significantly because of his inability to chew through armor health nearly as effectively as it was before. Reaper is he's not anywhere close to the meta. He is like a C tier pick at best, and until we see some kind of change to Reaper, we're not going to see him actually compete in the meta at all. Maybe in the lowest tiers of play, you might be able to get away with him, but in general, there are simply better picks in the game right now than playing Reaper. I can't recommend not using him more. When we swap over to Sojourn, you're going to see that her primary fire is actually heavily affected by the damage from the damage reduction from the armor changes, and because of that, Sojourn, while she is still very much an S tier pick because of her ability to do everything all at once, her primary fire is slightly less effective against tanks overall, and while tanks may not be the character that you want to shoot with Sojourn, this does affect her ability to be as efficient as she used to be. And again, as I hold down the primary fire, you're going to see that it takes a significant amount of her primary fire, all the way down to like 8 bullets in the magazine while landing all crits to get Reinhardt out of his armor health, and this is not great for her. The saving grace in that regard, however, is the fact that her railgun still charges at the same pace. So as I charge up the railgun up to 100, you're going to see that the rail is significantly less affected by the changes to armor health, and while it does have the reduction in headshot damage, the railgun is actually not that affected by it overall, because the 25% reduction makes it so that you are actually less incentivized to hit the crit, and you can actually hit the body shot with it and still deal a significant amount of health to the enemy, right? So you're going to see that the damage reduction actually makes it a little bit easier to play the character, arguably raising her skill floor slightly because it is less incentivized to hit the critical hit with her railgun shot. Again, it is almost effectively the same amount of damage compared to hitting the headshot. So as I pop the ultimate, you're going to see, I'm just going to wait, bang, that is a headshot. That is a body shot, very much close in terms of the amount of damage that they do, and the headshot damage is actually still very significant versus tanks. Sojourn very much still an S tier pick, and probably the only DPS, I would say, maybe in S tier at this point, although arguably we could still talk about one more, which we'll get to in a second. We're looking at Soldier. Soldier is still very good, still a B tier pick, and his Helix Rocket, while the damage is significantly reduced versus armor, by 15, I want to say 15 total reduced damage overall, because each rocket is reduced by 5. The rocket itself can't actually crit, so when you combine that with some headshot damage from his primary fire, you're going to be able to pretty easily take tanks out of their armor health, but not fast enough to make him a top tier contender. Soldier very much a B tier pick here. You can, like I said, you combine the Helix Rocket with some critical hits, and you'll be able to very easily make mincemeat of the tank's armor. But the main reason why you would want to use a Soldier is his sustained damage over time. While he is not as high of a burst damage character as like a Sojourn, his damage over time is still pretty significant, and so because of that, you're going to want to utilize this character at longer ranges. He also has 0 damage drop off, so while it becomes harder to hit targets from farther away, even after this meta change, the damage will still deal the same amount, whether you're 5 meters away or 50 meters away. It just depends on whether or not you're hitting the headshot. Very much a B tier pick in Soldier. Still good, still very strong. However, not nearly as oppressive as something with a higher burst damage potential, because of the Helix Rocket's cooldown. When we look at Sombra, Sombra is one of the characters most affected by the armor change. And as you see, as I fire into this Reinhardt, how much of her clip it actually takes to get him out of his armor health is very significant. 2/3 of her entire clip just to get him out of armor health, and that's assuming you hit all crits, right? So even if I'm all the way up in his face, still 2/3, basically 2/3 of her entire clip to slightly over half even to get him out of his armor health, and you're basically never going to be that close to a tank, even when you are playing as Sombra. Now, the thing that Sombra does have, while she loses a lot of damage based on the reduction in headshot damage, she loses a much larger amount of damage based on the reduction in armor. The changes to armor affect her very significantly. What Sombra has to combat this is her cube, and her cube's damage is not affected by either one of those. So even if the tank is at full health, you're going to see that the cube is still able to prime them for a significant amount of damage, even without her primary fire. So you're going to see that deals, I want to say it's 90 damage overall, and that takes out a significant amount of damage from their armor health, and she can utilize that combined with her primary fire to make them slightly less effective. And as we wait for his health to go back up, the cube damage actually applies faster when you hack them first, and because of that, she's going to be able to shut down certain targets decently well, but it does reduce her time to kill significantly. It changes the breakpoint modifier significantly for Sombra, and she is way, way less oppressive to a tank character than she used to be. And she requires her cube to be able to do anything within any reasonable amount of time. Again, as we fire into him, a ridiculously huge amount of her clip just to get Rein out of armor health. So we're looking at Sombra as a high B tier to a low A tier pick. Still incredibly oppressive against squishy characters like a backline assassin that can come out of the shadows and spawn camp somebody, keep them effectively in their spawn forever, but far less oppressive at countering even the people that she previously was supposed to counter, like Wrecking Ball and Doomfist. Sombra is just simply less effective at dealing with these characters than she used to be, and that may be a good thing overall for the meta. When we look at Sim is very much still a C tier pick, and while she can deal a good amount of damage over time, it requires a large amount of ramp up time, and Symmetra needs her, she needs either the help of her teammates or the damage of her turrets to be able to deal with these higher health characters. Her beam takes too long to ramp up to realistically be effective in any kind of way, and if you look as I hold it down on Reinhardt, just how long it takes for that to actually take him out of armor health. It's like, in that amount of time, Ryan could just two-hit you, right? Like, he could just walk up and swing on you twice, and then, you know, somebody else could tickle you for the remaining hit points, and that would be the end of you, as Symmetra. Like, it's just not, she's just not good enough to be a meta pick in any kind of realistic way. Very much still a C tier pick. The only reason you would really play Sim is to drop a teleporter out of spawn and get your team somewhere a little bit faster. Sim needs a full rework, I think, to make her effective really in any kind of realistic way. Aside from that, Sim is very much at the lower end of the meta. That being said, real quick, that being said, with Sim, you can actually apply the DPS passive with her turret, and because of that, that gives her a small amount of edge here in reducing the amount of staying power that tanks actually have, because as a tank gets the DPS passive applied to him, similarly to Ashe, they will have that 20% reduced healing, and it will make it more difficult for their teammates to actually keep them alive. That being said, Sim doesn't have the range or the burst damage potential of Ashe, and while her primary fire is not affected by either the critical hit damage or the changes to armor, the primary fire takes so long to ramp up that it makes her effectively a useless character. So that it feels bad, but it is what it is. In terms of Torbjorn's primary fire is affected slightly by the changes to armor and the tank passive change. The damage is reduced by a small amount in terms of headshots and by 5 in terms of a body shot, but Torbjorn has a large amount of burst damage on his primary fire. You can see it absolutely obliterates these bots' health from full health, and as we apply it to the tank, it's only 3 shots before Torb is able to completely get them out of their armor health for a Reinhardt, and then he can follow up with some of his right clicks to deal a large amount of burst damage to them as well. So Torbjorn is slightly less affected by this and can, similarly to Symmetra, can actually utilize his DPS passive being applied by his turret to further reduce the staying power of tanks. Torbjorn, like a low B tier character overall. The main drawback to Torb at this point in the meta, is that his right click, which was his main ability to tank bust before, which is his shotgun, his right click is now less able to deal with these tanks because of the damage reduction that they have. So the armor change significantly reduces the amount of damage that they take per pellet from his shotgun, as well as the critical hit damage reduces that as well. So like Torbjorn's shotgun is going to require him to get them out of primary out of armor health first, and then he'll be able to be effective on them. But similarly to Reaper, he just doesn't have the burst damage that he used to with these changes, and because of that, Torb is not sitting as good in the meta as he was like a week ago here. So Torbjorn, low B tier, high C arguably, but still above Sim, but not as good as he used to be. For Tracer was the S tier pick pretty much throughout the entire game. Maybe you could say that she was A tier in certain times, but Tracer is very much still high A, if not still S tier, based on her mobility, her ability to get into places quickly and get out of places quickly. You can see that it takes an entire clip to get somebody out of their armor health here, an entire clip and a melee to actually finish the job. And you can take the Reinhardt out of armor health. We're just going to wait for his... I'm going to reset the character here so that we can see it properly. But an entire clip plus a melee to take a Reinhardt out of armor health. And you can see even still he has a very small amount left. But Tracer is one of the characters most affected by the change to armor overall. So she is getting hit with the reduced 25% damage from the headshots, as well as the armor damage is also reducing her ability to deal damage to tanks. And so Tracer just further falls into her role of I kill squishy characters, right? So when you use her against a different character, someone without armor, you can see absolutely obliterates them, even against some of the higher health characters like Reaper or like Cassidy, still able to just completely obliterate their hit points without even so much as a single clip. Even against Roadhog, who has the 25% reduction from headshot damage, you're still going to see Tracer is very, very effective. That being said, she doubles down in her nerf with the changes to armor. So again, against a Winston, barely took him out of his armor health there. Just a slightly less damage than he actually has armor health. And so while Tracer is still very much a high A tier, potentially S tier pick, she did lose a little bit of her effectiveness in this meta. And so I would say that Tracer is probably still going to be played at the highest levels of the game. However, will fall off slightly in the lower ranks where the lower skilled players are less able to get as much value out of her. With Venture is unable to critically hit, and because of that is not affected by the reduction from crits that has been given to the tank passive. That being said, it takes a ridiculous amount of primary fire to actually get a Reinhardt or like an Orisa out of their armor health. As I swap it over to Orisa, you're going to see that Orisa takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hits to actually be taken out of her armor health. And while yes, there probably will not be a time that you are only utilizing the primary fire as your way to damage with Venture, the drill itself, the dive, drill dash is less effective. The burrow is less effective than it used to be because all of these are getting reduced while the tank is in armor health. And as you see, the drill dash is, while still able to boop them, very, very much, like, largely useless compared to a tank with armor health. Very much a reduced damage ability compared to how it was, where the combo for Venture was able to easily take out characters that had lower hit points. It's going to be less effective now, and the damage has actually been moved around slightly. As we use it against a Roadhog, we can utilize the combo that has been killing targets, and you can see that it still deals a large amount of damage, but the reduction in damage versus tanks with armor is very significant. So as we do that exact same combo again, we burrow up, we shoot down, we drill, we hit them. Very much still effective against, very much less effective against tanks that do have armor. So you're going to see Venture is like a low B tier pick. Still a pretty good character, but very much niche in their ability to do the things that they want to do. Where Venture becomes very, very strong, however, is with their ultimate. And with the ultimate, it actually becomes a significantly more powerful tool the farther away they are, because of its high burst damage comparatively. And as we wait for Reinhardt to respawn, and I go ahead and I use that again, this is a full health Reinhardt, and you can see how much damage this actually deals to him, even with the armor health. Very, very, very much still a deadly ultimate, but that is kind of the only burst damage that Venture has. Low B, high C, and in addition to that, very, very situational. Depending on the comp of the enemy team, you could just be shut out completely from utilizing Venture in this meta. So this is something that you guys need to keep in mind when you're picking a DPS character. You need to look at what the enemy team has, and if they have anything that can fight you from long range, it's probably better just to not pick Venture overall. For Widowmaker, Widow is taking a small amount of hit from the amount of burst damage that she can do, but you can see very much still effective in what she's capable of as long as you are hitting the headshots. She gets the double whammy of the damage reduction from the critical hits as well as the damage reduction from armor, but because she has such high burst damage, the 5 reduced damage does not actually hurt her as badly as some other characters. And in addition to that, you're going to see her burst damage against armor is still very, very potent. So 2 shots from a Widow will easily take a Reinhardt down to what is basically absolute, right? Like basically killable. However, her primary fire is very much worse than it was prior to this meta. So as we swap Reinhardt back over and give him a full health pool again, when she's not aimed down sights, it takes an eternity to take this Reinhardt out of armor health. Almost the entire clip there. And like, if you are ever that close with a Widow that you're able to hit all of those crits on a Reinhardt, you're probably dead anyway, right? So Widowmaker has not been hurt as badly in this meta as some of the other characters, but she is not quite the A tier pick that she was before. I would say a low A to a high B, very much still capable of killing tanks, especially tanks that have no armor. As we swap it over to Zarya, compared to that Reinhardt, Zarya was kind of hard countered by Widow in the past. While she does get a slight increase in her survivability, it's still very effective against characters that do not have armor, and we can utilize that against a Queen as well. We can see that even with the 25% damage reduction, she absolutely dumpsters these characters that do not have armor. So still an A tier, but maybe like a high B tier against high armored tanks. As we move over to the supports, Ana is arguably going to be a higher tier pick than she was in this meta compared to other metas because of her ability to anti-heal the kind of more oppressive tanks that have larger hit pools. Ana, her primary fire damage is actually considered damage over time and cannot crit. And because of that, it is not reduced by the damage reduction from critical hits, so you'll never see the minus 25% dealt to her. And the changes to armor, this is actually a slight buff to Ana's primary damage compared to how it was prior to this patch. While it used to deal 30% less damage to characters in armor, reducing her damage over time by 5 is actually a slight buff. So while Ana is going to be able to shoot tanks and still deal basically full damage against them, her main draw is still her anti-heal, which is going to make them impossible to save. And when you're going up against tanks that are basically S tier, like Orisa and to a lesser extent Roadhog, the anti-heal is going to become something that you need to utilize in order to actually take down these kind of behemoth level tanks that are just like impossible to kill, right? So as you hit Hog, you're going to be able to neutralize his ability to heal himself, which takes away his survivability, the main part of his survivability in his kit. With Orisa, she can just go gold. She can fortify against you, and even though she is not able to heal herself, the anti-heal doesn't affect her as much because her ability to be defensive is actually removing the enemy's ability to critically hit her. So the anti-heal less effective against Orisa, but Ana is slightly more meta than she was because the armor change actually gives her a small buff to her damage overall. As we swap over to Baptiste is actually hurt a little bit more from the armor change than other characters, because not only does he deal less damage per shot than somebody like an Ana, whose damage is over time, or somebody like a Kiriko, whose burst damage is up front, his 3-round burst style of weapon is reduced 3 times by the changes to armor health. So you're going to see 15 overall damage reduced from his headshots, in addition to the 25% reduction from headshot damage. And so it takes Bap a significant amount of shots on target to be able to actually take a tank out of armor health. And when we swap over to like a Reinhardt, somebody who has a large hit point pool plus a lot of armor, you're going to see 2, 3, 4 shots to actually get him out of his armor health. That's 12 crits with Bap to be able to actually deal with the tank. And because of that, he's been hurt a little bit, where Bap was like a B tier pick before, maybe like a mid B tier pick. He's actually kind of a low B tier pick now. His main ability, the immortality field, is still kind of the thing that puts him into a tier of his own. The window is just a shittier version of Kitsune Rush at this point, like a window straight up just a worse version of Kitsune Rush. And while it was really good in Overwatch 1, the window is significantly less powerful here in Overwatch 2, although it does allow him to better deal with the changes. You can see he can actually 3-hit even a Reinhardt if he lands all crits inside with the power of the window. The Kitsune Rush is a larger radius, a larger length, and is more able to be followed up by from his team. So Baptiste, while he is significantly hurt by the changes both to armor and the tank changes overall, is still a pretty good pick. None of the supports are very low in terms of I would argue that there is not really a C tier support. I would say that the lowest they go is like a low B, and I would say that Bap is kind of at that mid to low B tier at this point. Again, because of his double down on his his damage against armor characters. Well, Brig is kind of like a high B. She has one of the highest pick rate, or one of the highest win rates in the entire game. Brig can't actually crit. So while it takes a long time for her primary fire to actually get Reinhardt out of his armor health, and other characters she will also struggle with getting them out of armor health, her kind of main damage is not from her primary fire to begin with, right? Brig's kind of staple move is her ability to use shield bash and then like push people into the places she needs them to be, while combining her inspire to heal over time, right? So she can, with the changes here in the mid-season patch, Brig can actually shield bash, then rally to shield bash a second time, and that deals a large amount of damage to squishy characters, as well as, because she can't critically hit, that burst damage combo is able to pretty effectively take out a large amount of hit points from, like, high armor health characters. So you're gonna see Brig, you're gonna see her, the combo is a little bit difficult to pull off, but you need to primary fire, shield bash, rally, shield bash again, and then primary fire again. So it's kind of like a 4-piece combo, but as we see here, I'm just going to do it to the back of Reinhardt so that I don't accidentally knock him off the ledge. You got the primary fire, shield bash, rally, shield bash, primary fire, and you're able to take out a large amount of his hit points pretty quickly there. And when you combine that with the boop ability that she has, while tanks have had their the distance that they are booped reduced, the double boop combo potential for her still allows her to rapidly reposition tanks and potentially boop them off of the map. So again, we pull up the shield, boop, rally, and boop again, and we're able to combine that with the whip shots to take tanks pretty effectively out of their comfort zone. Brig, while her healing overall is not nearly as good, her ability to brawl with these characters, in addition to the amount of additional survivability she gets from the armor health changes, you can see that she also has a small amount of armor health there in the corner, makes her better at dealing with her own counters, which are Tracer and Sombra, characters that are inside of her backline, trying to mop up her kind of squishier support allies. Brig is able to more easily deal with them, and because of that, you're going to see Brig, I think, a little bit more in this meta moving forward. Brig is kind of like a high B tier pick. While she's not as good as some other characters, you are going to see more of her, and she is essentially not as hard affected by the changes to the minus 25% critical hit damage, because she can't actually crit to begin with. When we come to Illari, Illari is one of those sneakier picks here, because she can utilize her high burst damage to get around the changes to armor health, and while it does take a large amount of time for her to be able to burst a character out of their armor health like Reinhardt, because she has to wait for her primary fire to fill back up to full damage, right? She is actually still able to very easily pick people off, even from long distances, because if you time her play correctly, then you are able to get a lot out of her high burst damage. And you can see, similar to like a Sojourn's railgun, it deals a massive amount of burst damage per shot, and because of that is less reduced by the armor changes overall. So this is only going to take a 5 damage reduction compared to something like a where are we? Like a Sojourn who has 5 damage reduction per shot, right? So, well, she has to hit all of these shots. Illari can only hit 3 shots and still deal basically the same amount of damage because of the amount of burst damage that she's actually able to put out. And so Illari, while she is not necessarily as good against tanks as she was before, you were kind of never really shooting the tanks in the head to begin with, so her role kind of stays intact. Illari's still kind of like a high B tier character, and in terms of her offense, and in addition to that, with her Captive Sun ultimate, you can actually utilize this combined with a shot of primary fire there. You can hit them in the head once, and if they have the sun debuff on them, the Captive Sun debuff on them, they will burn out the rest of their armor health through the explosion from that. So if you detonate them, you can hit them with it and detonate them, and it will instantly remove all of their armor health and that works with pretty much every tank in the game. Even Orisa, as we swap over, there's that sneaky little combo if you can utilize the ultimate and detonate it, and it will decimate pretty much any tank in the game. So Illari is very much a high B tier character right now. While her healing is not necessarily as much as some other characters, her ability to be in certain places, plus her ability to boop things, is still pretty significant compared to something like a Brig, who has to utilize 3 boops in a row to boop a character off the map. Illari is able to easily take advantage of her ability to one-hit, plus her high burst damage to maintain her spot as one of the better supports in the game. When we move on to Lifeweaver is kind of an interesting choice here, because his thorns actually deal a pretty good amount of damage, but when you use them against an armor health target, you're going to see that they are not only reduced by 25%, but also reduced by 5 damage per thorn, and that means that he takes a significant amount of time and actual shots on target to be able to take a tank out of their armor health. It's just not as good of a spot for a Lifeweaver to be hitting the tanks to begin with. This was never really the way that you wanted to deal with it in the first place, but he's still very effective against characters that do not have armor health, like Zarya. You can see he's shredding through Zarya's health comparatively. It took 60 shots to be able to take the Reinhardt. Almost 60 shots to be able to take the Reinhardt out of armor health. You compare that to a Zarya, who he can basically kill in the same amount of, man, now I need to wait for her, health to come back. I'm just gonna reset her. He can basically kill Zarya in the same amount of shots that it takes Rein to go out of armor health, right? In less shots. And because of that, you want to, if you're utilizing Lifeweaver, you want to kind of just avoid shooting the tank as much as possible. Go after the lower health characters, and in doing so, you're going to be able to easily take out squishier characters. But against anything that has armor health, you're going to really feel the reduction. Against a tank like Roadhog, you're going to see that it feels almost the same as the armor health, but it is actually 5 damage more per shot. So again, as we funnel the damage into Hog, we're looking at almost his entire clip to be able to kill a Hog. Even though Hog has no armor, the size of his hit point pool, just in general, makes it so that he is like able to withstand that punishment for a longer time. Then you compare that to somebody like Queen with a lower hit point pool, right? And you're just like slightly more than half of his clip is able to absolutely dumpster the Queen. And the Lifeweaver Thorns are still very effective at range as well. So this is kind of like Ramatra in that way, where he is experiencing a large amount of damage reduction compared to armor health characters, but less so against regular tanks. So just in general, if you're playing Weaver, utilize his ability to kill squishy characters and just avoid shooting the tanks pretty much entirely, and you should be good to go. I would say that Lifeweaver is like a mid B tier character because his healing is so significant. His numbers that he puts out are ridiculously huge, and while he lacks the one-hit potential of a character like Lucio, and he lacks the one-hit potential of a character like Zenyatta, while Zen can't actually do it to tanks, he can do it to squishier characters. His numbers that he puts out are ridiculously huge. So Weaver is able to keep teams alive and do it from complete safety from extreme distances, right? Because his primary heal can be used from a ridiculously long distance away. And that keeps him in complete safety. So with this character, he's like a mid B. His offense has gone down slightly, but his ability to pump out the numbers is just so huge that it kind of can't be denied, right? As we swap over to Lucio, you're going to see that Lucio's damage, while it has been reduced per bolt, in addition to his own nerf that he got nerfed at the beginning of Season 10, where his damage went down per shot, you see that Lucio takes 4 full volleys to be able to take a Reinhardt out of his armor health. The ability to boop characters very much still intact, right? So while his primary fire is not as good as it was, his boop has only been, like, it feels like, I'm just gonna say this, right? Like, the reduction to the amount that tanks have gotten booped, you can feel it against certain characters, you feel it way less against Lucio. Like, he just feels like he picks people up and repositions them like a character playing chess, like a guy playing chess, right? Like, you just pick up the character and you move the piece across the board and you drop that piece where you want it, right? Like Lucio is just ridiculously good at moving people around. And so while his primary fire is less effective now than it was in Season 9, he's still very much like an A tier to an S tier pick based on his ability to still one-hit characters with, 500, 800 HP. He can even do it to Roadhog, just easily lift him up and send him to his death, right? And because of that, he almost doesn't even need to worry about his primary fire being nerfed. So he does, unfortunately, suffer from both the reduction in critical damage as well as the reduction per shot due to armor. And again, because of that, you're going to see that Lucio is far less effective against armor tanks. So when you're using him, make sure that you are positioning yourself in a way that you can get value out of the boop, and you're going to see a lot of value out of this character still. Still one of the best designed characters that has ever been in any game. Lucio has one of the best kits ever. Still, like, high A tier, if not S tier, but reduced slightly.
Don't worry, I'll be right behind.
When we look at Mercy, her damage versus tanks has never really been that good, but it's pretty bad now. It's pretty much, like, Mercy was already kind of a C tier pick in terms of her ability to be a good support anyway, and she's very much still a C tier pick here in the mid-season patch. Her support ability is still decent, but not nearly as good as other characters, and like her ability to heal herself is kind of still her main draw. While healing other people, she keeps herself alive. She also benefits from the support passive, giving her health regen faster than other characters, as well as the increased output of the support passive. So as I wait for her to take damage here, I'm gonna take her down to like 100 hit points, and then we're gonna talk about that. Her offense has been nerfed even more. So, and of course I walked over the health pack. So I'm just gonna stand in front of this. You can see that she's still pretty effective against the lower health characters. A 4-shot kill. Excuse me, a 5-shot kill. But her aim assist is still really good. Very forgiving. Yeah, I'm not even on their heads. I'm like next to them. And it's still counting as headshots with Mercy. But the amount of damage that she does versus armor targets is basically 0. There's almost no reason to use Mercy in this meta, aside from if this is just the character that you like to play. In terms of what she can do offensively against any tank that has armor, she's just going to be basically useless, right? That was like 13 shots there to get Reinhardt out of his armor health. Mercy's still very much a C tier pick, and I think she's kind of on the cutting edge. If you buff Mercy too much, she becomes hard meta. And so, like, for Mercy players out there, I hope you guys do receive some kind of change to your character. But in general, like, you have gotten hit again. This is basically another nerf to Mercy in this meta. When we look at Moira was like a high A tier pick before. And while you are probably not given the tanks the suck here in the prior meta, you probably definitely don't want to do it here moving forward. The damage reduction from Moira is actually not affected by either it's not affected by the changes to critical hits. It's not affected by the changes to armor, because she is actually considered damage over time. So none of this is actually hurting them at all. But, like, regardless, look how long it takes to actually drain a Reinhardt of his health, right? Like, when are you ever doing that, realistically? Unless your team is team-shotting with you, or unless you have a very low health tank in front of you, you're probably never going to do that, right? And even with the help of the skill orb, it still takes just a huge amount of time to kill something with Moira. She was never a tank buster. She still isn't. Very much has maintained her A-tier position. Very good against squishy characters. A high amount of healing, similar to Lifeweaver, an extreme numbers character, insofar as that you'll see a massive amount of damage on the board from your primary fire, a massive amount of healing on the board from your heal plus your healing orb, but like, completely useless versus high health targets, and pretty much useless versus tanks. Zenyatta is has moved up from like a mid B tier up to a high, I would say like a mid A tier. Maybe not high A tier, but still pretty good. The damage from his orbs has been reduced by 25%. He takes he deals 5 less damage per orb based on the armor changes. So you are going to have that working against you, right? And in terms of your one-hit capability against a character like Reinhardt with full armor, you're going to see that it still takes him out of armor health, even without the Discord orb, even with the changes to armor and the changes to the tank passive. Zen's right click is still very, very effective, and because of that, Zen is like maintaining his spot as well as kind of moving up a little bit in the meta, because with the changes to armor health, the Discord orb actually becomes more effective. Like a higher priority thing to have on the tank. And the Discord orb is going to increase the damage that the tank takes by 20%, which is almost neutralizing the reduction from the headshot damage, right? So as we put the Discord orb onto the Rhine, you're seeing that he's easily able to kill him in just 6 shots. And when we have the Discord orb on and we utilize the right click to charge it up, you're going to see just how much damage this is actually able to do to a full health Reinhardt, almost able to one-hit a tank. So Zenyatta, while his healing is not as good as some other characters, his ability to put out damage as well as buff the damage of his team and reduce the tank's ability to survive is very much meta in this meta. Like a high A, mid A at the lowest for Zen. Very much the offensive pick here. And then saving the best for last, Kiriko, who has been an S tier pick for the entirety of Overwatch 2, is getting the damage reduction from her primary fire hit with the tank roll passive change, and as well as that, the 5 damage reduced from her kunai. So you're going to see that she is less effective at killing the tank in terms of his armor health, because of the massive damage reduction that she is taking from the 2 buffs stacked. However, and I just want to pull this up real quick, mid-season patch damage spreadsheet. Give me 1 second. I want to give you the exact numbers with Kiriko, because this is important, because the damage that she deals compared to the previous armor change, where is she? She is right here, Kiriko. Where the previous damage that she dealt per headshot with her kunai was 31.5. After the changes, she actually where is it? She actually deals. Where are you, Kiriko? She actually deals 40 damage per shot with her kunai now. So the 30% reduction from armor plus the critical hit damage that she the critical hit damage that the tanks have gotten in reduction, those 2 changes combined have affected her less, and this is actually a net buff to Kiriko's ability to be able to headshot tanks. So she went from 31.5 damage per kunai headshot to a 40 damage per kunai headshot, and if that isn't just the funniest thing ever, I don't know what is, dude. The character that was already S tier before is not only still S tier, but slightly better against tanks than she was before. Like the 30% actually hurt her worse than 25% plus 5 damage reduced. So go figure. Kiriko, while she was S tier in the previous meta, after the changes in the mid-season patch, is still S tier, dude. Like the only, I would say the only support really inside of S tier at this point, arguably Lucio, but I don't think we can argue that she is like a step above him now with the changes to his primary fire, combined with the damage reduction from crits. The damage from Kiriko is still basically just as good as it was before. So Kiriko S tier as the same as she was before, and the same as she's been since Overwatch 2 released. Probably the best support character in the entire game, and will probably remain so until she sees some kind of significant rework to her kit. that is your Season 10 mid-season patch tier list, talking about the meta heroes, where they sit in the meta, what is good and what is not good. I want to thank everybody who has come to chill with me today. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. If you guys are here and you have not said anything in the chat, you guys can let me know. I want to see if there's anybody online right now. We got Spicy One is on right now, but aside from that, nobody else is on. I'm probably going to call it there. I think that's going to be our mid-season patch. I want to thank everybody for coming and hanging out, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and move over to this. I don't think we're going to have a gameplay portion of today's show. My shoulder is bothering me again. This was happening to me earlier this week. Whatever I did to my shoulder, dude, I messed up my mouse arm, and because of that, like moving the mouse back and forth real fast is actually pretty painful, decently painful here. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it there. We're gonna have a discussion type of video for this one, and people that come and watch this on the replay will hopefully be able to get some value out of it. If you guys have been here and you've been watching me, I hope that you have also gotten some value out of it. What are your picks in this meta? What do you guys think is is really good, is really strong? I would be interested to hear if you guys leave comments, if you let me know what you guys think will be the meta moving forward. Do you think that these changes to tank will stick around past season 11? Because I got this weird sneaking suspicion that the tank changes will actually go away here. At least some of them will be reverted at the start of season 11. I'm not sure if we can deal with a time where tanks are just like giga buffed this hard. I don't know how long that tanks will get to be in the sun, but in the spotlight even. But I am kind of glad that they have gotten a chance to shine here for at least a little while, because tank has been pretty much the worst role in the entire game for the entirety of Overwatch 2. Good on tanks. I hope you guys are enjoying the mid-season patch here. Katie K, hey, I'm working and just listening. Kiriko is S tier plus, my favorite. Katie, thanks for coming. We're gonna go ahead and end the show here right now. I have an injury to my shoulder, so I'm gonna call it a day here and let this be a self-contained video where I talk about the heroes in the meta right now. Thank you all for coming and watching. I am Moonchild of DudeNoWay, and I will see you in the next stream. Take care.